call to order this meeting of the Raleigh City Council. We will start off the evening with requests and petitions of citizens. I'd like to remind everyone that we ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes, just so we do have a long agenda tonight. First we have is Jennifer Falsgraf, Arc of the Triangle. Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Falsgraf, and I'm the Executive Director for the Arc of the Triangle. The ARC is a national organization that supports the disability community. The ARC, the first chapter of the ARC in North Carolina was actually born in Raleigh in 1954. Parents of children with special needs got together and said basically enough. Our children need to be in school, they need to be at church, they need to be playing with their peers, living complete and full lives in the community. And so the ARC was formed. Over the last 6 decades, the ARC has provided a myriad of programs for children and adults with disability, and the City of Raleigh has been a part of that funding stream for many years. The ARC has applied for city funds in support of 2 of our community programs this year. I was informed by letter that the ARC is no longer eligible to apply for these grants because our corporate headquarters are located in Chapel Hill. It should be noted that last year we were awarded $8,000 and an exception was made because we do have a physical office in Raleigh proper, right off Glenwood Avenue. I'm hoping tonight that I'm going to be able to convince you that our corporate address should not work to the detriment of adults and children with disabilities. 3 years ago, the local chapters in Wake, Durham, and Orange counties merged to form the Arc of the Triangle. Chapel Hill was chosen as our corporate office strictly for the most basic practical reasons, and that was because of the mailing address. Our finance manager's office is in Chapel Hill, and so the majority of the actual snail mail we still get is bills and financial documents, bank statements, and so they're sent to that office, so that was made the corporate office. My office as the executive director is in Raleigh. Our HR department is located in Raleigh. Our quality assurance department is located in Raleigh. I even can't imagine with the growth that we're seeing in Wake County with our Medicaid services that we won't eventually change the corporate headquarters to our Raleigh office. We're just not there right now. The people that benefit from the city's generosity are a group of teenagers and seniors with disabilities, most of whom do live in Raleigh, a few others in other parts of Wake County. Supported retirement is a unique program designed to ensure that seniors with disabilities remain active and a part of their community in their golden years. You'll see our seniors at the 5 Point Center for Active Adults, walking at Crabtree Valley Mall, and volunteering at the SPCA. Project C is a summer internship program for teens with disabilities attending Wake County Public Schools. They hold their jobs at Marbles Kids Museum, the Cameron Village Public Libraries, and more businesses throughout Raleigh and Wake County. And both of these programs are unique to Wake County. They're not offered in Durham or Orange County. They've been a little jewel in our crown for many years now. In fact, Project C is over 30 years old and Supported Retirement is 20 years old. So I would ask you for your consideration in supporting the Raleigh disability community and acknowledging that a Chapel Hill address no way determines how we provide services to the city of Raleigh and how we partner with Raleigh to serve this population. Pretty good.
And that's just telling you your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you. I'm done?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
How many residents in Raleigh do you assist?
Through Project C, I believe this year we served 14 of our 20 students were Raleigh residents, and in supported retirement, out of the 24 seniors, 22 of them live in Raleigh proper. And as we grow the funds, the idea is to support more people, and of course the city's funds are used to support the people that live in Raleigh.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Steve Holm was here this afternoon. I'm assuming he doesn't want to come back. Next we have Natalie Miles.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Natalie Miles. I'd like to address a traffic concern involving my uncle, David Wayne Dunn, who was killed January 23rd at the corner of Seabrook Drive and Newark Drive.
And I'm sorry, can you please give your address for the clerk?
The address.
Your address for the clerk.
My address is 711 Continental Drive, Durham, North Carolina, 27712.
Thank you.
Yes. I'd like to suggest a flashing light indicating a car was approaching to be placed in that location for cars turning onto Seabrook Drive coming from Newark Drive. Seabrook Drive is a road with many hills, and when you're approaching at the stop sign on Newark Drive and looking to your left, there's a hill that sits directly outside the turn, making it a blind turn, whether you're making a left or a right at that location. I've driven that route after the incident and realized that there is a need for some sort of indication of a car approaching so that tragedies like my family has recently experienced don't happen again. Yeah, let me start my app. Okay. In the first, wait, where's play? Is everybody looking at that screen? Is it playing?
I think he's working on it.
No, the first picture. First slide?
The first slide?
Yes. Here I have a picture of where the light should go, along with a video of the turn showing the visibility in the area, as well as a picture of my uncle who is no longer here. The first slide shows directly across from Newark Drive as you're approaching the stop sign. It's where I would suggest the light to be placed so that you are aware of a car coming over the hill to the left of Seabrook Drive. Slide 2. Okay, and press play. It's just a video. Here is a video of that hill to the left approaching the stop sign on Newark Drive, and as you can see, there is a constant flow of traffic coming from that direction. Going pretty slow there. And there's no way of knowing when a break will come to turn safely. The only way I see this traffic concern being rectified is through light indication. So as you can see, the hill is kind of blind right there, and it's a short area. And, oh, well, I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Manager, can we ask staff to take a look at what improvements are available to us and to improve the safety of this intersection? Maybe bring back some options. Flashing light might be great. We have traffic engineers. There may be something even better. So I'd just like to refer to staff and see, they'll get us a report back and see what they can do. Huh?
Can I get 10 seconds on this slide?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Here's a video of that hill, and this is my uncle, David Wayne Dunn. Just a moment of reflection of how his life could have been saved if the driver from Newark Drive that struck him while he was on an evening stroll on his Harley would have known that he was coming over the hill. He would still be teaching Sunday school and still resuming his position as chairman of the Board of Trustees at his church, and tonight celebrating his 25th wedding anniversary.
Oh, well, I'm very sorry for your loss, and we're going to look at it and see what we can do to improve the safety there. Thanks for bringing it to our attention.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, and next we have Fred Platt.
Good evening, council members. My name is Fred Platt. I reside at 3016 Allen B. Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been the GM Taxi now since 2013. I'm proud of the improvements that we've done at the taxi service here in Raleigh. We came here to Raleigh committed to improving the service. We made a commitment of $3 million. We purchased 100 new Priuses, 12 new Sienna vans, and all of our vans and our Priuses are equipped with GPS tracking, video cameras, credit card machines. We have a great relationship with the police. By us having the cameras on board, we're able to provide the police with video evidence of anything that may occur in a neighborhood that we may be driving through. All the men and women that drive under our brand are independent contractors, and they're held to a high standard. Everyone here, hopefully everyone here, knows of our 333 number, and you've seen our vehicles drive around the city. We pride ourselves by keeping our cars clean and new and up to date. We come here today to talk about the Go Raleigh program. For those of you who may not know what the Go Raleigh program is, it's a transportation for qualified individuals that reside in the city, and it provides two types of service. The first service is handy van, which is wheelchair access service. The second type is ambulatory or non-wheelchair service. We're here to talk about the ambulatory service. There are currently 32 companies providing service to the Go Raleigh ADA program. The 32 cab companies have a total of approximately 100 cabs. There are approximately about 800 trips per day. And when we've asked the city staff for requirements to be permitted under the system, they told us we needed to talk to the taxi inspector since the vehicles are all permitted by the taxi inspectors. Like all other cabs in the city, we are permitted like anybody else. We have drivers that are eager to participate in the service. As I mentioned, they're all independent contractors and are just looking to make a living. We ask that the staff open it up for us to participate. We meet the requirements of being permitted in the city. It won't cost the city any more money. It's just a matter of opening it up so Taxi can provide the service that we continue providing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Manager, can you give us a little insight onto how taxi companies are selected?
Right, I'll ask David Eatman from Go Raleigh to come forward and make some comments in response.
Thank you.
So we do have 32 existing companies within the taxi program. We have about 12 companies that are on what we consider a wait list. They've requested to participate in our program. Some of those companies have taxis of 100 or more. I think Taxi may be one of those companies, quite honestly. So we have 12 on the waiting list, and Taxi is number 10 currently on that list.
How does the waiting list change?
As long as they are licensed on an annual basis, they stay on the list.
So how do they ever move up?
We do have companies that drop out occasionally.
So let me
And
make sure
growth of the program, obviously.
I'll make sure I understand this, Mr. Eatman. So we have 32 taxi groups in the city. We have 9 that we permanently use, and we don't share the wealth amongst those that are waiting?
We have 32 companies that we currently utilize.
So why can't the remaining be utilized as well?
We try to keep the program manageable, obviously. 32 is a very large number in itself. And also, it seems when you start spreading that too thin, it can get challenging from a service provision standpoint.
Well, let me ask a question, Mr. Eatman.
Okay.
Would it be fair and equitable if a group had a contract, or the 9 or that you're talking about 32, they get a year and then you rotate some of them off and you put some of them in waiting? I don't know how long they've been waiting, but it seems as if could be a long process.
We could certainly work with the Transit Authority on developing a procedure for that.
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, if you have a company that's been participating and doing a good job, why would you take them off?
Yeah, are they rated? I guess they're at the end of every year or something?
So we don't necessarily grade them, but certainly if they pass the standards of the taxi inspector, insurance, licensing, things of that nature, then they do continue to participate in the program.
I've actually received email from a disabled person who uses the paratransit program and has had significant issues with it. and has had issues specifically with the contracted taxi companies that have been employed. Issues like people just not showing up or being very late to pick him up. He's in a wheelchair and has had to sit out there and wait for someone to come and at an assigned time to pick him up. So I would be open to exploring improving the program and possibly including more vendors that can provide perhaps even better service than what we have.
Are the wheelchair trips a different list than the non-wheelchair load?
We actually provide some of those trips ourselves, but we also contract wheelchair trips to part of those 32 companies. It's a smaller portion that actually provides that wheelchair accessibility.
So what we can do is, let's put this in the Transportation and Transit Committee to look in further detail, and then we can also have a conversation with within the Raleigh Transit Authority.
That sounds great.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
No, I don't have anything new to add, just the idea of some sort of performance measure would be good. Then you'd have some grounds for saying people that have a preferred vendor. But also, I hear what some are saying about, hey, if they've been providing the service well for a long time, they should get some preference for that. But by the same token, I don't think we want to say we want a monopoly by those people. And so I like the idea of a rotating approach.
Understood.
We'll work something out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to the matter scheduled for public hearing. And Mr. Platt, you still here?
Mr. Platt?
They'll notify you when the item comes up in committee.
Terrific.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So we'll move to matters scheduled for public hearing. The first is Transylvania Avenue Street improvements, confirmation of charges. Do we have any presentation or?
Good evening. Yes, we have a 4-slide PowerPoint to bring everybody up to speed on the program if you'd like.
Okay.
What project that is. Here we go. Okay. Petition number 1344, Transylvania Avenue, was issued in June of 2013. The petition and assessments were authorized in October 2013. Construction was from January 2016 to September 16, and the final project acceptance was in late 2016. Final assessment calculations were completed in early 2018, and which leads us here today for the final public hearing and assessments confirmation tonight. The project took place right behind the Raleigh Country Club off Glenwood Avenue, right around Crabtree Valley Mall. And here we are with a map showing where the curb and gutter was installed, as well as paving between Hertford Street and Beaufort. 2 blocks was the scope of the project.
Okay. Okay, we'll open up the hearing. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none, we will close the hearing and bring it back to the table. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have street closing, 0617 Church at North Hills right-of-way. Thank you.
This is a petition to close, excuse me, 2 small portions of right-of-way of the existing street. Church at North Hills. St. Albans Drive is along here, and this backs up to I-440, and this is actually, I can't remember the name of the church, but the church for which the street, I believe, is named. Until 2008, the old alignment of St. Albans was actually along here, and there was no street here. The conditions to for a permanent street closure, as articulated in our comprehensive plan, are first that it will not compromise the integrity of the street network, It will not impair the ability to provide utility service. It will not adversely impact health, safety, or welfare of the public, and that it is consistent with historic development requirements, and that it is not an historic district, and that you determine it is in the public interest. To give some background about this closure, this is a diagram from the petitioner's proposed plat that shows how they intend to slightly realign the alignment of the street. This portion here, I'm going to go to highlight, is actually effectively was realigned previously, and they're trying to claim back some right-of-way that's in excess of where the streets currently are. And in this location, they intend to realign the street to tee it into a new street that does not yet exist. And this is exhibit from the adopted Master Plan MP3 2016, which was adopted by City Council in April of last year. It was a part of the Z2816 case for the North Hills East Master Plan. And it shows the alignment of the new street and some of the tracks that they intended to develop there. To go back to those conditions, there is one condition that we need to have some conditions on. That is that there is a number of utilities that are within pieces of these right-of-way that need to maintain some easements for, or move those utilities. Other than that, there isn't a reason from staff's point of view not to proceed with closing these rights-of-way. And that, of course, those rights-of-way will be closed once the street is moved into a new place through development activity and the city's development review process. Any questions for me?
I have a question. The addition of the street, when you come down and where it currently curved to the right, but now it's got a dead end and you're going to go to tract R and T and Q and S. What does that do to the tree buffer along the belt line between that lot?
I will have to have the applicant speak to that. I'm not certain I know exactly how much of that tree buffer is in the NCDOT right-of-way and how much of it's on theirs, and if there's any conditions of the master plan that might speak to that.
I think there was an overlay on there that has been on there for a long time that saved a tree, had a tree save all, I remember Thomas talking about it. The tree save all along there. So I'm just interested in that before we vote on this.
I have a question. Do street closures, do they go before CACs?
This has already been heard.
It has?
Not generally. I did not go to the CAC meeting myself as a manager for this review process, but I do understand that the CAC discussed it, and I was in contact with the CAC chair to make sure that there are some questions were answered.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to understand a little bit better. So when we talk about the street closing and basically to realign everything, are we stopping traffic for any period of time?
No, there shouldn't be any
no
reason to
period.
do that. I mean, maybe a matter of a few hours, and there may be flagger operations where it's restricted to one directional traffic. I will point out that I think it's about at this point, the street is no longer a public street. From there in, it is actually a private street of the North Hills development. And so this is at this point a public dead end, and that if these new streets are built, they will be dedicated and accepted as public streets, which will eliminate that dead end condition.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Can someone from staff answer your question about overlay?
About the tree.
Potentially, I think we have at least one colleague from Development Services that may have a part in reviewing
Thanks.
that, and Travis maybe?
I'm sorry, is the question, does this property have an overlay on top of it that would affect or impact trees?
A tree,
I want to know if they put this road in, are the trees left as the buffer between the belt line and this development?
So there is no shod yard. That's typically what we would see in a preservation standpoint. You know, without looking into the plan development itself to see actually what's required from a tree preservation standpoint, I don't know that I can accurately answer that right now.
Okay, I'm almost positive that there was a shot. I remember Thomas talking about it, so.
I'm looking at the zoning map now, and I
Not
don't.
on there?
No, ma'am. There's no shot on it.
okay, was there a tree buffer
It's possible that's contained within the master plan, and I would have to look to that zoning document to
Could you
answer that
bring
question.
that back to give us that information,
Yes, ma'am.
Travis?
Mhm.
Thank
Would
you.
you like that tonight, or would you like it at a later
Well, we
date?
can have the hearing, but I'm not gonna vote on it till I understand how the context of all these roads, what it's gonna leave, because it's just, you know.
And the Beltline has, what, 100-foot right-of-way?
I would defer to transportation, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll open the hearing. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this item?
Good evening. I'm Andy Padiak with McAdams, and I'm the civil engineer on the project. Could I offer a few answers to your questions?
Sure.
Related to the buffer, we have a space, let's see if I can do this. We have a space right here between the public street, Church at North Hills Street Extension, which is basically a frontage road along the Beltline. We have a gap of approximately 25 feet in there, which is intended to be a densely planted buffer because we do not have a shot in this location. So we worked with staff during the PD review to leave that space for that purpose.
So the answer is no, there will be no trees.
Exactly.
There'll be brand new trees.
Okay, so there'll be tiny little trees that will take 30 more years to grow.
Okay, and I think that was the only question that was outstanding. Was there another question that I could help answer?
The right-of-way,
I thought there was a shot.
Excuse me?
the right-of-way, is this, any of this going to be in the right-of-way for the Beltline?
It is not. So the proposed work parallels the right-of-way, so we do not. We will have some grading that we will cross the right-of-way line, but we worked with the NCDOT to obtain those encroachments. But that's it. There'll be no new construction, of course, no changing of the right-of-way for the Beltline.
So when you're changing those grades in the right-of-way, will that be, also include tree removal?
There are not any trees within the Beltline right-of-way, so the tree removal will be on the property only.
There aren't any trees in the right-of-way.
And then we're dedicating, I don't know the exact percentage, but comfortably over the 10% tree conservation requirement for the parcel.
So this is a planned development,
It is.
SPD?
Hey, I'm TJ Behringer with Kane Realty. I'm 3212 Craven Drive. I will say that we're keeping 25% to 30% of the trees on site. Those are focused more in the floodplains and in the buffer, and then even outside of the buffer by the creeks that run through the kind of a little bit further to the east on the plan, and a little bit between tract Q and S. So we are saving a lot more trees than are required, and that was a lot of discussion with the neighborhood as we went through. And then there's a lot of topography in there, so in putting the road through, that was important to staff from a block perimeter standpoint. It's been a big part of the zoning and in the planning to make sure that there's roads to access all around the sites. And so those are two big things, but we did add that 25-foot buffer so that we could plant, I believe it's 2 rows of trees in there. And that was a lot of discussion with the neighborhood and with just in general planning. But yes, they will be new trees. So thank you very much.
So just
All that's coming out.
It's hard to tell exactly where, but you can see your building up here.
Okay, so, thanks. I'm just seeing if there's anybody else here that wants to speak to this item.
So did you get an answer to that question?
Not yet. Travis is back there furiously looking.
I'm not exactly sure where that is on the site.
Sometimes they do
Well,
have trees in the right-of-way.
I can go back to the,
No, I know.
doesn't work that way on this one. Okay. So, location, I mean, we were just looking at.
Is that what he said?
Church at North Hills Street. No, we're sort of into it there now. Back out again.
So TJ, you say you're going to leave some trees that you have to leave on this site, I suppose, and you're going to do it more in the floodplain. So I'm assuming, with that said, that these trees that we are concerned about will be removed.
Yes, I would think most of the trees along 440 will be removed. I mean, it was This is all 100% consistent with the zoning that we went through, and the zoning was a master plan. So we had a lot of discussions with the neighborhood, and the focus was on transportation. There was a lot of discussion about transportation and about getting people off of St. Albans. And so the road that we're building along there, the frontage road, is actually going to go down and then ultimately connect to Navajo Drive. So it'll be another way to get out of the neighborhood. And that was probably the most sensitive thing of the whole neighborhood discussion. And there's actually been further discussion on the small area traffic plan. So that was a key point. And there's a lot of grade and topography back here. I mean, it's very hilly, as you guys know. And so in grading all that out, yes, you do end up having to cut down trees there. And so we're saving trees not only in the buffer, it's outside of the buffer and outside of the tree save also. And the neighborhood was focused on the traffic and then the closer buffer to the neighborhood. And so that was the key in there.
For part of Church of North Hill Street, there is a tree buffer between the road and the interstate. Do you plan on being consistent with that?
It's either consistent or better. I believe it's a smaller buffer as you go north, or as you go west, and then, but as we're going down, it's 25 feet, and that's more than we have in the further west portion of the PDD.
Yeah, there's not many trees in the west portion of the PD.
Right. In that one, there's a
That's
requirement when we build the next block that we build a wall there.
Okay.
So. But all of this is 100% consistent and is really the rolling out of the master plan. We're not changing anything with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure we didn't have this discussion during the rezoning.
I don't remember it. So Travis,
It's all about the other side. We
Yep.
never had this discussion about the rezoning, and you're still sure there's no shod?
Travis, have you
I know.
gone
Memory's
looking?
bad, but that I remember.
Yes, ma'am, I'm fairly certain there is no shod on this property. And what the master plan says is there's a total potential tree conservation area of just over 2.5 acres. And
Yeah, in the
And, yeah, I think what I heard people say is it would happen, in the floodplain area here,
Right.
which is true. That is what's denoted in the master plan.
Well, I don't know how the council feels.
Did we hear from the public?
I can't, they focus on what's gonna strip out every tree in the building.
Is there anybody from the public here?
No, I've asked, there's no one else here for this
Okay.
case.
Okay.
All right.
But we can hold it. I mean,
You want to discuss
I'm
it
just
more?
really struggling with okaying something that's gonna strip out, it's gonna look horrible. It's gonna strip out every tree to the belt line. I know you're planting some back, but
30 years.
that's,
We can place this in transportation and look at it in a little more detail.
Little deep diver.
yeah.
I have no problems pulling that into my committee.
Do I close the hearing, Dottie, to do that? Close the
Yes.
hearing, to put it in committee, or leave it open, or does it matter?
Either option, I believe, would work. If you wanted to accept more public comment, you could leave the hearing open,
All right.
refer the matter back, and then continue the hearing, so that if you had
Let's leave it
questions,
open then, leave it to committee.
Okay,
Leave it open.
we'll leave it open and we'll refer to Transportation Committee. Speaking of committees, before I move on, Healthy Neighborhoods Committee is meeting to discuss the missing middle assignment. And it looks like the earliest everybody will be ready is on 3/27 at 4 PM in the council chamber. So March 27th, 4 PM, Healthy Neighborhoods is gonna meet.
Missing middle.
Talk about the missing middle. Is the item we referred from today.
The question I have on leaving the hearing open, do we need to leave it open to a date certain to continue the hearing, or continue the hearing in committee, or?
I mean, it's not a,
It's not a zoning,
not a
so-
zoning case, so there's no clock.
I assume you could close the hearing and take public comment
We
anyway?
can take, if we close the hearing, we'll be taking public comment at the.
In the committee, you can
Committee.
do that, yes, if you
Okay.
if you wish to.
Does that make you happier?
Makes me happy.
Okay. Then we'll close the hearing and refer, and you'll announce it
Yeah, we'll work it
Next
out. We'll let you
meeting.
know when.
when we're gonna bring it to committee. Bring the committee will hear it. Next we have Z 917 Edwards Mill Road.
You got
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry.
Let you miss-
0717 Moton Place.
Is that the one you're gonna?
Paris Street. Okay, and let me ask staff, this is the same case as Z 2717,
It's the same parcel.
same parcel. Should we look at these together, or no?
I mean, that is certainly possible. I think they're, could be separate or they could be together. The issues are very separate according to our comp plan, but it's the same piece of
Oh,
land.
We'll hear this one and maybe hold off voting until we hear Z 27 afterwards.
Okay. So this is a large, well, relatively large plot of land in East Raleigh, between Raleigh Boulevard and Rock Quarry Road, where subdivision was platted in the past. I think that development resulted in some of these cul-de-sacs where there are houses now, but there was no development on this particular piece of land, even though the right-of-way was platted. So it has been petitioned to close the existing rights-of-way, and that our current development standards would result in a different street layout that would serve the public interest better, would help connect different sides of the neighborhood together through the existing stubs, and help make a better connected neighborhood, particularly to the schools and the transit that's planned in the area. I'll refer you to, again, the conditions for permanent street closure. I won't repeat those since I just stated those a second ago. There is only one piece of utility infrastructure in this area, and that is a sanitary sewer runs through some of this right away and also through the parcel. We'll show, this is from our internal mapping system that shows utility rights of way. So there is already public utility easement around the other sanitary sewer. So public utilities asked that if this be abandoned, the right of way be abandoned, that a similar 20-foot sanitary sewer easement be maintained around the sewer lines that are there. Any questions for me?
No. Not for me. Anybody else? Okay, we'll open the hearing. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to this item?
Dan Coleman, 517 Rock Quarry Road. Mayor, you made an excellent observation at the beginning. This should have been a companion to 2717. We are asked to, we're afraid, if you put the map back up. Just help me out. We're afraid of this street going all the way through tying Marywood into, I can't see down here below, tying Marywood in down toward Lenoir Street. You can't see here if it does that or not. But this should have been discussed. It's my understanding the people that own the right of way are the adjacent property owners, and this should have been discussed with the CAC when 2417 was being discussed in detail, and at least taking a vote forward with it. I think there are people here tonight that were relying on maybe halfway supporting 2417 with the understanding that Marywood was not going to go all the way through from Davie to Lenoir and beyond. So it's just hard for citizens to weigh in on these things when they're held separate. It's abstract enough as it is, and then when two things are overlapping and you hold them in separate discussions, it just makes a joke of citizens' engagement. And you're wise, you do the right thing.
Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this item? Okay.
I have a quick question for staff. Is there a Robinson Avenue that Marywood comes into?
So it's a little hard to see on this map. On this screen, it's easier. There is no right-of-way here. There, I believe, was a right-of-way at some point. It had been petitioned to be abandoned for the width of one, or the depth of one lot. So if you look at those two lots on either side, they are now wider, and there is no right-of-way. There is a right-of-way here. There is a right-of-way here that doesn't fully connect, and there's probably no opportunity to connect to that. There's a right-of-way here and here that would not be. So these three stubs, let me rephrase this, these three stubs are the points of access to this property. There is no point of access here, and there's about a 10-foot wide sliver where there used to be an alley across the back of these that had been previously abandoned. So those are probably the only points of access. There may be, if a subdivision were to take place here, there may be a stub to some place, but not certainly, and probably not. But yeah, if this were built as a subdivision right now, you would have lots off of both of these cul-de-sacs, and this one would, with this cul-de-sac, and would connect through on this side. And what is likely to take place if this is abandoned in a different subdivision, you know, regardless of what this was zoned, is there would be a street this way and like that. And that would be the difference. And this cul-de-sac may be different. The right-of-way widths would be narrower to our current, I think, it would be different, I should say, than our current standard. You wouldn't have the cul-de-sac bulb there.
Okay.
But there's no right-of-way there.
So as of right now, the way it is, there's 3 entrances off of
Yes.
Morton, Parish, and what's this other one?
Marywood from the
Marywood
north.
from the north.
Moton and Parish from the south.
Okay. Yeah, great. I think,
Okay. Just may I ask a question? Is this part of a larger development that we've done before?
now, we have a zoning case tonight.
Well, there was, I believe that a part of this may have been, I don't know the exact history, and I may, no, that's all I have. This entire area was platted roughly together a number of years ago, and I want to say it was in the 80s. It may have been in the 90s. I don't know exactly when it was, and parts of it were apparently not built, and now it's being re-looked at with fresh eyes.
Okay. If council has no objection, I'd like to just keep this open and then look at C 27, 17, which is the rezoning case for this. I think that might help us
Agreed.
make some decisions about this. So we'll keep the hearing open for 0717 and look up rezoning Z 2717.
Do you want to do that one first?
Huh?
Do you want to
Yes.
do, do you want to do the Lenoir Street now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. This is a request to rezone just over 10 acres from R4 with conditions to R10. I'm sorry, it's split zone right now. Part of it is R4, part of it is R10. And it's all being rezoned to R10 with conditions. And your CAC voted in favor back in November, and your Planning Commission also recommended approval. So you can hear, so we were just looking at this, so here's Moton. Oh my goodness. Parish, and Marywood comes in here. And we're southeast of downtown. This is Davie Street and Lenoir. So look at your site here. You're just south of Roberts Park. You're east of the National Cemetery, west of Raleigh Boulevard. You can see largely single-family surrounding. And a couple of views of the site. So this is looking east on Lenoir Street, so you can see there are properties that front on Lenoir Street, and the site in question is behind that. Looking east on Moton Place into the site. Looking south on Marywood into the site. And then a view looking along Davie Street. So the site is back behind the properties that front on Davie. And then a view looking northwest on East Lenoir. So again, the site in question behind the properties that are right up on the road. So the conditions that are proposed limit development to single-family detached units. So that's detached houses. Limits it to 55 units. Requires the conservation development option, which is a specific type of development pattern in the UDO that in exchange for a little bit of more open space set aside, allows a little bit more density. They're saying if they built over 50 units, they would use that development option. And then it also requires stormwater management for a 15-year storm event. So again, a look at the site. Here's so these two are your existing zoning, and then this is what's proposed. So you're going from, in the end, your maximum allowed is 55 units. Your office, retail, industrial, currently not permitted, would not be permitted. Future land use map here is low density residential, and there's no designation on the urban form map for this site. Overall, this is consistent with the plan. It's consistent with the future land use map and a number of other policies. The preserving the grid issue, the right-of-way closure that they're proposing would likely result in a new grid pattern that would probably make it more consistent, but they have not addressed that in the conditions. Again, your Planning Commission recommends approval, as does your South Central CAC. What questions can I answer for you?
Yes, I have one. We had received an email from a radio station.
Yes, sir, I believe they are here to speak tonight.
Okay, well, I was wondering, do you have any information about this easement that they noted that they have for underground electronics for their radio station?
I don't have specific information about the easement. We did talk about the issue in terms of how to represent that in conditions, if that was an issue for you that you wanted to see addressed. And the general consensus among staff was that it would be best to address that in terms of including a condition that limited or prohibited development in the easement area, but trying to memorialize the easement again via zoning conditions would not be appropriate. I think that would be better recorded with the Register of Deeds.
Okay.
Isn't that already on the deed?
I don't know if it is.
Can you go back to the map where it's the split between the 4 and the 2?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in 10.
Sure.
How much of the 4 is in the conservation? Not conservation, yeah, the conservation.
In the conservation development option, that would really, I think, be up to them. They have not submitted, at this point, I think those details are outstanding.
Okay. And so by right now, they could do, between those current zoning, they could do 74 units.
Right, so I think that's where the table being split out is helpful. Right now on that
2
R4
and
part,
72.
right, they could do a maximum of 2 units there currently.
Right.
And then in the area to the south, they could have as many as 72 units.
So when you combine it, which what a zoning would be, it would be, you could say these 74 units they could do right now.
Right.
But they're willing to zone down to 55.
I have a question about the stormwater. In one of the conditions, it said something about for 15-year stormwater, and I think your last slide said this was recommended because of tighter stormwater controls, but somebody on the Planning Commission voted against it because they thought it needed even more strong stormwater. So can you explain what's going on there?
I'd like to defer to stormwater staff. I believe they're here tonight and can answer more in a more detailed way about what's currently in the code and in the regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Just, Mayor, if I might, this has a relationship to the conservation development option. Is that something that they're asking for, or is it an option they have here? And in the code, is the conservation development option 15 years? Is that recommended by staff, or is that code?
So the stormwater issue is separate from the conservation development
Option.
pattern type. Yes, ma'am. And that option is available to them with or without the condition. They're simply saying that if they build more than 50 units, they would definitely use that
Okay.
development pattern.
But the 15-year condition would apply either way.
Yeah.
Either way.
I'm looking for my stormwater friend who has not arrived behind me yet. Is that correct?
I don't see anyone.
Is it Ben Brown?
Oh, he's,
Come on, come on.
Hiding out.
He's hiding.
As far as downstream, we do have a couple of downstream complaints, but they're mostly from sediment in the channel. So, sorry, they're mostly from sediment in the channel that goes kind of bisects the site. So there's not a structural flooding complaint downstream, so that wouldn't instigate any higher stormwater standards from a code perspective. I mean, obviously from a rezoning perspective, that's more than all right. But I would say that the 15-year storm is a little bit of an odd request because it's not a standard storm event that we usually get. It would usually come down to either the 10 or the 25 or the 50. So
Why did they not just go with
25.
I couldn't answer that. I'd have to ask the applicant myself.
It's more stringent.
If it's more stringent, if the problem is such that they need it higher than 10, normally, whatever.
So Bonnie, what I was trying to get to, and I don't think I asked my question very well. So my question is, in the development option, did they opt for 15 years, or is that something that staff says you have to do? Because like Stormwater said, I always think 25 and 50.
Right, so remember, zoning conditions are offered voluntarily, it must be offered voluntarily. I believe that's what the applicant was willing to offer.
Okay. Oh, got it. It's an applicant choice.
One other question. This is Tupper 2 area, and there was a Tupper 1. Received some emails at one time about the city putting funding in far as the purchase of this property. I guess I'm kind of leaning towards Dottie in this question. What is there any city money currently involved or was involved in the purchase of this property?
I'm not aware. I just don't know the answer to that question. I'm happy if that's an issue you'd like me to come back to you with. I'd be happy to do that. But I'm not aware of any.
Well, I know that Mr. McCormick did a lot of research on this before his retirement, and my understanding was that he was satisfied that the city did not have an interest here.
Okay. All right, that's something that we probably may have you look into, but we'll let you open the hearing.
Yeah, okay, we'll open the hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Yes.
Tony Quadraro, 1012 Collins Drive, Raleigh. Relative to the 15-year stormwater requirement, with climate change and Houston having 3 500-year floods, and what we've seen here, and what, even though the legislature won't recognize ocean rising, how valid is the current 15-year stormwater calculation versus what has been the recent history and the projections from knowledgeable scientists?
Okay, is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this item?
Good evening. My name's Toller Ratledge. I'm here on behalf of the owner and the developer. Thank you for your time this evening. A couple of things that I'd like to address. I'll just kind of go in order of what I heard. In terms of city money, we're not exactly clear on where that even started, but I think it has to do with this property was assembled originally by Mr. Gatling. He left the property by will to North Carolina State University, and he directed how the funds from the proceeds of the sale of that were to be spent. Had nothing to do with the property or money going into the property, so I think there's just been a misunderstanding of that. That's really all I can say about that. On the stormwater issue, that was actually, there was some question about whether a 10-year event management would be sufficient. And so it was suggested by the case planner that maybe they go up to 15. And again, we recognize that, there typically isn't a 15, it's 10, 25, 50. It's our understanding that a 25-year is not necessary, that a 10-year is what would be standard and required for this property. But, in an effort to address those concerns, the owner and developer has said that they would size this for a 15-year event. The radial easement, we're not aware of an email or any problems. We have been, let me explain the radial easement. I don't know how we go about, how do we put a map of the property out? There. Yes, I think that might help. So there is a radio station that has a radial easement, and it's on specific lots. The actual radials don't exist on most of those lots. And they don't need, that radial easement was put in place 50-plus years ago. They don't need the easement, as broadly as what the deeds require. So what they have actually asked for and what we've agreed to is to give them a radial easement with some additional rights that are just on the lots where the radials exist. And those lots are right behind the radio tower. So there would not be any, my understanding is, there wouldn't be any actual development on that.
If you just touch on the screen, you can mark where you're...
They have to have access, do they have access to the tower? You're talking about a certain amount of space away?
No, it's actually, it's wires that actually run underground.
They usually make a circle around the tower, radius.
They do.
Underground.
That's right. They do. And there was some misunderstanding. I think there was some initial thought that it was much broader than what it actually is. And so we've negotiated an agreement with them. They would like to have more rights in order to be able to go in and do work on those wires that are underground. They don't have those rights right now within the easement agreement. So we have said...
How did that happen? How do they access the tower? Yeah.
Well, the tower runs off of Bart Street. The tower is actually right there.
Okay.
Well, we have a letter from Dr. William Suttles, who's apparently president of WPJL.
That's right.
And he says the easement regards our radial ground system, which runs underground under a portion of the adjacent property, which is included in the tract in question. The easement gives us the right to go on that property to repair, replace, or extend these radial wires, which are essential to the operation of our radio station as authorized by the Federal Communications Commission. It says, we have been in discussions with Cliff Zinner at RD Construction concerning this issue, but to date have not reached an agreement. I want to be sure that if Mr. Zinner's intention is to deem the portion of this property in question as a designated city conservation area, that the rights of our easement will remain in effect so that we can do anything necessary in order to maintain the performance of our ground system in keeping with our FCC license. He says this will be crucial for us going forward.
Dottie, wouldn't that be tied to the deed?
So the easement rights would absolutely be tied to the easement instrument.
That's correct. And we've actually reached an agreement about where that easement is going to be. And I'll see if I can do that. So you can see the whole site up there. That right now where the radials run is, I'm not drawing this very well, something like that.
So have you worked an agreement? Are you saying that the letter that Mr. Cox read is incorrect? You have reached an agreement?
We have reached an agreement. It has not been signed, but we have reached an agreement.
So,
the actual easement document has not been signed and recorded, but we've reached an agreement about where they're going to be. That's where the radials exist. They don't go beyond that point right there.
Do we have any way of knowing that, Dottie?
Certainly, we could take a look at the easement instrument if we wish to do that.
And we'd be happy to, we'd be happy to submit that.
And I think the larger question is regarding a conservation area. If is any of this going to be designated as a conservation area?
I think a portion of it, Ty Armstrong it's at RD Construction and Poplar Guy are owned by the same individual. And so Mr. Armstrong is here and can address the specifics about what's going to go on the site where.
Because if
But
it's a conservation easement, does the city's rules regarding conservation or conservation area, does the city's rules, would that prevent the radio station from doing any work on the site? Ground disturbing work.
Well, I'm going to let Mr. Armstrong address where exactly the conservation easement would go. I don't think it conflicts with where their easement is, but I'm going to let him tell you specifically about that. Do you want to do that now, or do you want me to finish? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Ty Armstrong at 106 Southeast Street. So in terms of, I just want to make sure I was understanding your question correctly. The conservation
Well,
easement.
conservation area, as I understand it, and staff can correct me, is that once they're designated, those areas cannot be disturbed.
We've been tying it up. Just do like 5 more minutes and see.
So if those areas cannot be disturbed, then the question is, how would the radio station be able to conduct any repairs or extend their...
So that would be dedicated, as she roughly drew out, that would be dedicated as open space. So they would have access to maintain that if they'd like. Part of it, of why it has not been signed, is it was pending site plan approval. So once we went through the rezoning case, then we would start with the site plan approval, and once that was approved, then we would sign the documents for this new easement language for this specified area.
Okay. I still got some uneasiness, but I'm gonna let y'all finish talking, and we'll let the other side come up as well.
So let me ask a question. Something about this just doesn't kind of feel right. So obviously, this station is using old technology.
Yes, ma'am.
That we would claim today as old technology. But if I was this station and I was funding staying on the air, I would want to make sure that I had access to the copper underground to make sure I could still broadcast in an old system.
Yes, ma'am. And so they will have access to that. We actually, in conjunction with their engineer, we actually went and located all these radials to find out exactly where they were, to get a better understanding of this. And, come to find out, as you mentioned, it's older technology. Essentially, in a perfect world, it would be 360 degrees around. As you know, on the west side, that's a cemetery. There's houses immediately next to this radio station. So essentially what we found was they had some in their front yard, and then they had some, going in this rough sketch right here. So essentially, that was a separate issue of what we've been working on. They're still going to have their access to it. They're still going to have their easement. Their language will actually be a little stronger for them to access that. Kind of jumping back to this all started with a conservation development option just because we felt this was the best product. And in order to utilize that, we were told by the city that we could not utilize the open space in R4 to count for the total site conservation development option, which requires that 40%. So that's originally how this all was started. At first we were told we would just rezone that small section, and then we realized in order to implement conditional uses for that entire site, it would require a rezoning of the entire parcel. So the small section that we're actually trying to rezone is right around 1.74 acres of the R4.
So again, will the conservation area encompass where this easement is for the radio station?
Conservation development option, there would be open space where that easement lies.
But the bulk of it probably around the stream that runs through there, right?
You'd have a lot around the stream. You'd have some buffer areas. You'd also have this section right here. Once again, the site plan has not been fully vetted until we get the, decision on the rezoning, somewhat putting the cart before the horse.
So let me just ask you, how much of this land is actually buildable? Because if you have a tower, I assume they have guy wires?
No, sir. It's freestanding.
Okay. But you can't build on top of these grounded loops.
Correct.
So, and if you got a stream going through there, I'm interested in knowing, in 55 units that you're talking about putting out there, how much land are you actually talking about?
As far as, I'm not sure the exact acreage, it's, I don't have that specific number there for you.
You could actually be putting it on half the property then, is that right?
It'd probably be closer to a little over.
Well, obviously, they can't do 72, and that's what they have by right now.
Right.
So,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
So I didn't think I really heard you answer Councilor Cox's question, 'cause I thought you were gonna say, if we do the conservation option, it'll all be around the stream, but then you said, no, there might be some open space, but it sounded like that might be part of the conservation option on top of the ground loops. Is that true or false?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
So some of the conservation area, his question is, some of it is where the ground loops are, that's just gonna be open space. And then some of it will be around the stream, is what you're, more or less, around the stream. Does that answer your question?
So the question, well, it's really a question for staff, and if they put the conservation requirement on top of the ground loops, would the code allow them to go in and disturb that area to repair the ground loops? I think that was your question.
This is actually Dr. Suttles.
Could staff answer that question, please?
This is the owner of the radio tower.
Well, I think it would be good for staff
really
to
a
answer.
code question.
Yeah, this is a code question.
So is the question, if the conservation development option is invoked and the area near the tower is designated as open space, can the area be disturbed or can the tower be maintained? Am I capturing that correctly?
Yeah, the question really is whether the conservation area is designated as area that cannot be ground disturbing activities and therefore would preclude them from maintaining their equipment.
So what the code says about the conservation option is that you set aside a certain amount, a certain percentage as open space, and that open space can be active open space, it can be passive open space. So there really is no code requirement or code prohibition against that.
Disturbing activities within the
Yes, sir.
dedicated conservation.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
William Suttles, Lenoir Drive in Raleigh. I'm the owner of the radio station, and we actually have worked out, we think we've got an agreement about the space behind the tower. The radio system is actually, it's not old school, it actually all AM stations have an underground. When you see an AM tower, you aren't seeing all the tower. The underground radio system is part of the tower. It connects to the tower.
You're not FM at all?
Sorry?
You're just AM?
We're AM, yes. We're the old WRAL AM. Okay. And my concern, and the reason I sent the letter, is I was concerned that if that area, which we've agreed on, will just be kind of a buffer between the property they're going to develop and build the houses, so that our radios will remain intact in that area. We pretty well agreed on that, but my one concern was if it was made a conservation area, it would prohibit us from going on and making repairs that we might need to make. I might have had my question answered. I actually spoke with Chris Crum in the planning department last week, and he told me that that an area, he said according to city code, that if there's an easement on an area, it cannot be a conservation area because of the easement. That's what he told me. But that would definitely be a hindrance to us if we could not go on that property and make changes. He said the reason for that was, obviously, we would have to disturb the area, and it could, bother the trees if we did that. We've agreed to pretty well leave the site intact as it is now, but we would need, going forward in the future, to be able to go and to repair radio wires in that area if we needed to.
Okay.
Dottie, is what he stated as far as the code?
So as long as it's not a conservation area where we could not do that, we're fine with what's being talked about.
I'd just like to offer a clarification, because I think the word conservation and conservation development is confusing. So in conservation development, the requirement is for an open space set aside. That is not a conservation area, which has different regulations. And I think that's the heart of the question here. So in a conservation area, no, I do not think you can do ground disturbing. You cannot do ground disturbing activities. But in an open space set aside, in a conservation development option, that is a possibility.
So, but what we also heard was that some other planning staffer said that there couldn't be an open space set aside across an easement that he already has. Is that a true statement?
I don't know, and the person that he was speaking with was very much focused on tree conservation areas, so I don't know if he was, his answer was from that perspective.
I think so.
Yeah.
So Dottie, do you have some insight into that?
So, from our perspective, if this is simply open space and not a conservation area, then land disturbing activity, maintenance of the radials could occur.
Well, does that also fall true for conservation development option?
Yes, and that actually is more a planning issue as to what conservation development option requires. I think they can better answer the requirements as opposed to the difference between open space and conservation.
All right, so the UDO as written does not directly address the topic of AM radial transmission lines under a conservation area. However, it does have 3 prohibited uses of a conservation area, and they are a wastewater disposal system, overhead electrical transmission lines, and streets. So this does not fall into either of those 3 categories. In general, my guess is that this mostly doesn't need to be disturbed unless there was some significant problem. It would be like any other maintenance issue in a conservation area, and therefore should probably not cause a significant issue.
Okay, we need to hear from the other side too. So it's usually 8 minutes per side.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
I didn't anticipate that we would. So just very quickly, I think we've addressed the issue of the radial easement, and everybody understands it's underground, and so it should not be a problem. The primary focus of what I wanted to talk about was how the owner and developer believes that this is going to benefit Raleigh, and specifically downtown Raleigh. There's been some question about whether this, this issue of down zoning, and we don't really see this as down zoning. We believe, and just Mr. Zinner, who is the owner of the entity that owns this property, has been developing property in Raleigh for 3 decades now. He's done developments all over Raleigh. He's very familiar with downtown Raleigh. He sees a market demand for single-family dwelling units that are not the typical quarter-acre, 10,000 square foot unit. He believes that this is going to provide, and that there is demand for these types of dwellings that have a smaller lot that may be on a 3,000 square foot lot, so that you have people that don't want to spend their weekends working in the yard. I mean, they want to have their privacy and have a single family residence, but at the same time they want to have the benefit of open space and community areas where they can take their children to play or walk their dogs, and then spend their time walking to the attractions downtown rather than working in a yard. So we believe that this fits in well with the downtown Raleigh revitalization. There's tremendous demand now for housing downtown, and it's not just the condos that we see going up on, every street corner. There's demand for single family, but smaller single family.
This isn't a question, it's a comment. There's a park across the street between this site and downtown, there's another park.
That's right.
So those amenities of open space are kind of covered by those two parks. Like I said, it's more of a comment, not of a question.
Well, I mean, I think that's true to some degree, but I also think it's not. I mean, with all due respect, I don't think that. I think there is a demand by home buyers for their own community space, and I don't know that. I mean, people may not be as comfortable sending their kids off to play in a park that's just down the street as they would in an open area that's right there at the end of their cul-de-sac. But we believe that there are homeowners that want these smaller lots, and by having smaller lots, by creating 55 dwelling units that each have smaller lots, you can have more community and open space. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're here to answer any other questions that you might have.
Okay, now, is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to this case?
Good evening. My name is Louis Smith. I'm at 1500 East Martin Street, corner of Marywood, which is actually one block north of where it's proposed to have an entrance into the development. I've been in the neighborhood for 48 years, and I'm completely confused. It seems to me like this is kind of a rush job. The lady just a moment mentioned that the developer does not consider this as being downsizing. How in the devil is it not anything but downsizing in terms of zoning? I'm confused in terms of, you're saying that there's 55 units that are proposed. And somehow I get in there that there's an option that as much as 74 units can be on that area. I am further confused that you got 10.14 acres in that particular zoning development proposed. Now I just heard that 5 to 6 acres will be where those 55 and possibly 74 units will be built. I am also trying to understand what actual assurances will these three areas, mainly Marywood going through to Lenoir Street, is there going to be a cul-de-sac? Is there an assurance? Or will it actually go all the way through to Lenoir? I am completely confused with these proposals. I would like some more opportunities to consider what's on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to this case?
I know we spent a lot of time on this. Dan Coleman, 517 Rock Quarry Road. My prepared comments are being passed around. I sat here tonight, the question that we asked that night at the CAC was, why was this occurring? If you could build 74 and you're going to take it down to 55, why? And now I've come to realize why Kimberly Horn and the subdivision that they platted in the late 90s platted 34 units is because of the radio field. And this has been a gallant effort to accommodate the radio field and get the maximum density because of the market. You know, I think Ms. Woodleaf is a brilliant attorney, but I sent the book and page number of that $300,000 the night I found it in the registered deeds. I think I sent a copy to Ken. This matter, I hope, goes to a committee because there's a lot of stuff going on. But I applaud the work that several of you have done since we've been kicking this thing around. I sat here, I'm so proud of the stuff that you have dug down into, and I have learned a great deal. I respect all of you for what you have done, the information you have brought to the table tonight, and you know what to do. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition to this case?
My name is Javon Rourke, 320 Sherbrooke Drive. I grew up in that neighborhood, and I've been in the military, toured the world, came back, moved into this neighborhood. When you increase the population density of that neighborhood, you're going to take away the character of that neighborhood. It's one of Raleigh's older neighborhoods. It's a very prestigious, has a lot of history in that neighborhood. And I want you guys to really think about that while you're debating this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this item?
Comment on what Lewis talked about. My name is, good evening, everyone. My name is Isaac White. I live 317 Marywood Drive. Lived in Raleigh over 60 years and been on Marywood Drive. Next year, the Lord say the same, for 30 years. One of the unique things about our neighborhood is a destination to go to and not to go through. So when I saw the signs that were posted about the street closure and what was being, you know, what you guys are proposing about the rezoning, I went around the community and I talked to so many people, and they had told me they had met with that company, Zenda. They had assured them, and I talked to the people that planning. They gave me many copies of the proposal. Kind of basically told me that they assured that, you know, the way that they had constructed it, the street, Marywood, would not go through there, that it would be the way that they have planned. And I'm kind of like Lewis, after hearing everything, it gets real confusing. So I'm hoping, as the young man just spoke about, that I could spend here and spend a lot of time, which they did, so I guess I do have a little time. You know, the character that was there, I raised 6 children there. You know, like I said, I grew up playing there. Mr. Gatlin used to run us out of his fruit trees, you know, not just by words, by other things he took at us. I remember where Lewis lived, he had his prize hunting dogs there, that whole block. I knew the man that took care of him. So yes, that has a lot of history. The people that I talked to, even the ones that just got here, they were under the impression that it would be a smaller, you know, the neighborhood would have the same character that's there. So I hope and pray that you guys would consider that. You know, if we're not sure, you know, maybe let's slow it down and revisit this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to speak to this item? Okay. We'll let her first and you second.
Good evening. I'm Brenda Williamson. I live at 320 Marywood Drive. I've been in the Battery Heights community for almost 20 years. Been in Southeast Raleigh for about 46 years. Like others, I am confused. I'm not in opposition to growth, because we're growing all around. New structures are being placed up. But in a small area as that, to put 55 or 72 units just doesn't seem plausible. It almost seems like they will be next to each other. And to create that kind of change in the community, that is a very proud community, would not be, I don't think, in the best interest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How you doing? My name is John Leach. I live on 1408 East Davie Street. The reason why I moved over there is because I've been there 30 years, 32 years actually. And the reason I moved because it was so quiet and no a whole lot of traffic. So that's the reason why I moved there. And for y'all to say that you're going to add 74 to 55 single-family homes.
That's okay, go ahead.
Single-family homes, I mean, that would change the whole community. And that's the reason why I moved there, because the community was quiet. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, was there anyone else? Okay, come on down. Anyone else after them that wants to speak to this item? You can come on down and sit in the front row.
Good evening. We are Frank and Stephanie Williams. We live at 1609 East Davie Street in Raleigh. As the gentleman said earlier, this is a very old neighborhood. It is the first professional black community in Raleigh and in North Carolina. It's on the National Historic Register. We are concerned with all of these houses coming in and all of this traffic that you're taking away from our community and the quietness of our community. We're concerned with foot traffic. We're concerned with all of these people that you're talking about cutting Marywood through all the way over to Lenoir, and you're talking about cutting Moton through back to that area. You're talking about the radio station. I think we're moving too fast. I think it needs to be slowed down, looked at carefully, prayerfully, and truthfully, because all of those houses, 55 to 74 houses in that small area, 3,000 square foot per house, that's just a bit much. I think it needs to be slowed down. I think you need to look at the history of the neighborhood. I think you need to look at the impact since the neighborhood, several of the homes are on that National Historic Register, and I think you just need to back up a little bit.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's bring this back to the table for discussion.
I have a question for staff. Sherry Brook Drive, how old are those homes off of Sherry Brook Drive? Do you all? I know you may need a second to look it up, but I would like to know. Because Sherrywood backs into this property. Sherry Brook does. It's the cul-de-sac. And it's definitely not as dense. Just the curve off of Davie.
So the area south of Davie around Sherry Brook is your Tupper 1.
Right.
And those date from the early 2000s.
2001.
2001 to 2007.
Okay. I asked that question because it's right next to it and it's not as dense as what this application is. I definitely think we need more time, and I think through a committee can kind of dig down to some of the issues and challenges with this and draw some clarification.
I'd like to send it to Growth and Natural Resources. Let's do a deeper dive on this.
I'm agreeable to that.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to refer this to Growth and Natural Resources, and that'll give us, and let's refer the street closing also.
Right.
Along with it, the 0717, so we can look at, I think there's some confusion about, the open space / conservation space /
Easement space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Easement space, and I'm still a little confused about it doesn't look like, about the money. The city had invested in this, I mean, it sounds like y'all really looked into it, but you can talk, you don't have to explain it now, you can talk about it in the committee, but I think that's one of the things we're confused about too.
Yes, ma'am, we'll
We're
follow
confused
up.
about a lot tonight.
So can I just, there's a lot of discussion about 55 versus 72 units, and I'm guessing that 72 is some theoretical.
No, by right, they can do 72 right now.
But it's still theoretical, not taking into account the blue line streams and the easement, the radial. So what I'm hearing is that the developer using a conservation option, which basically is going to protect land he can't build on anyway because it's in the stream buffer, and the radial is going to yield him with the conservation option with the smallest possible lot size, 55 units maximum. It doesn't sound like there's any way this thing will ever get above 55. But you guys can, us guys can talk about it more.
Well, so just to be clear, the condition specifically says not more than 55 units.
Okay,
And then the conservation development option is only required if they build more than 50 units.
So, but the point I want to make is for the people who are hearing a theoretical by right yield of, in the 70s, that's not going to happen.
Okay, we'll refer this to,
Mayor?
yes.
I'm sorry, are you going to close the hearing?
All the stuff going on here, there's no way they can ever do it.
Is it a conditional use case?
Yes, ma'am.
So then let's keep it open.
Yeah, keep it open.
Would you like to refer it to a date certain?
Yeah, you've got to.
When you will discuss it next at council?
Well, it's coming to committee, so.
It's coming to committee, so we don't know when the committees can take it up.
But you have to
Okay,
set
so
a
what's,
date.
what's our second meeting in April? What's the date of that?
You could just say that the second meeting in April.
Okay. So we'll refer it to the second, the committee's second meeting in April.
No, the council's second
Oh,
meeting.
council's second meeting in April, gotcha, okay,
17.
Thank you, Dickie.
okay. Okay, thanks for everyone's patience on putting two cases together. Now, Z917 Edwards Mill Road.
Right, this is not the first time you have seen this case. It is a request to rezone just under 8 acres from R4 to R10 with conditions. And this is a modification from what you saw previously. The last time you looked at this, it was asking for RX4, and so has come down quite a bit to R10. Went back to the Planning Commission for additional consideration after the initial public hearing. So we are, just southwest of Stowe Elementary, not too far from Crabtree Valley Mall is up this way, and then the hospital is down to the southwest here. And immediately adjacent to this site, you have some townhouses on the northeast side and apartments on the southwest side, and also to the south. A couple of views of the site, looking from Edwards Mill and Glen Eden. More views. So what's changing here, they have a current entitlement to about 4 units an acre. They're asking for more residential density. You'll note here in blue, this is what was being asked for before. So they were looking at close to 20 units an acre, a total of 155 units, and they have backed way off of that. And then the build to the they have specified they would be as close to the maximum of the setback allowed for townhouse as possible. And then they have also specified through their conditions some setbacks on the east. And we'll look at those when we look at the conditions. So a maximum of 48 dwelling units, limited to townhouse. Again, townhouses set back. And then some language about planting along the right-of-way, and then specifications about the eastern border and around the power line easement. Also, more about that area on the east side of the property and how those will be planted, and how any other disturbed areas would be planted in the setback on the east side. Building setback on the east side, and then some limits on how many townhouses can be strung together in a row, limit on 6, and some specifications about materials. So I just want to speak to condition 4, which it's helpful to see on the map where that means. So that's this area right here. This is that easement that I was mentioning. And then there's also more specification about planting back here. Basically, these are the areas where the adjacent buildings on the adjacent property are close to the property line, right? Your future land use map here is moderate density. There's no urban form map designation. Overall, consistent with the plan, no inconsistent policies are identified. Your Planning Commission recommends approval, as does your Northwest CAC. What questions can I answer?
No questions. Thank you. We will open the hearing. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in support of this case?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Michael Birch, Morris Russell Law Firm here on behalf of the applicant. Again, we are here with a very different case than we had when we were back here in November, although I know we've got two new council members, including the district councilor for this area, but we appreciate the opportunity council gave us in November to go back through the process to work with our neighbors in Carnegie Park and Laurel Hills. And so we feel like what we've brought to you tonight, the conditions reflect a consensus with those stakeholder groups. You see the unanimous recommendation from the Northwest CAC as well as from the Planning Commission. Staff summarized the conditions well. So again, just thank you all for allowing us to go back through the process, and we're here to answer any questions you all may have.
Okay. Do you have a question, or you want to?
I just wanted to thank you for working with the residents. I know there was a lot of negotiation and discussion, and I appreciate the opportunity to for everybody to get together and work out a good solution. So thank you.
Great. No, thank you. And Phil Layton, the applicant, certainly played a role with that, along with key leaders in the neighborhood. So thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Birch, I have one question. Have you considered stormwater low-impact developments for this site? Our new program?
That's been a consideration throughout the process, even kind of dating back to the original plan where we were leaving kind of half the site undisturbed. Let's see if I can go to an aerial here. But we have looked at kind of stormwater impacts. We feel comfortable given the buffers that we're retaining around the site. I think that's something that we'll look at from a kind of development type option when we go kind of through that subdivision process. Yep.
And you're familiar with the new LID program?
That's right.
Yes, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else here that wishes to speak in support of this case?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is John Kimber. I live at 4016 English Laurel Lane. That's in Laurel Hills. Laurel Hills is a neighborhood of about 280 some residences, and the Laurel Hills Homeowners Association has been working over the last several months with the developer, with other neighbors, including Carnegie Park, and I just wanted to be here to offer a voice of support for the proposed agreement that's being put in your hands for approval. Thank you very much for your time and consideration of this.
Thank you. Anyone else here that wishes to speak in support of this case? And anyone else after this gentleman that would like to speak in support? Okay.
Hi, my name is Steve Hauge. I live at 3900 Carnegie Lane. That's obviously in Carnegie Park. I just wanted to reiterate what our friends in Laurel Hills have said, that when you gave us the marching orders to get together and talk to one another, we met face to face, and we've continued to communicate and work with the developer. We do support the rezoning with the conditions that were really hammered out at the CAC meeting, where the developer presented conditions, and there was a lot of discussion and a lot of negotiating, and we were able to walk away with a unanimous support of the conditions as presented. So we do urge your support and give our support.
Thank you for all your work. Okay, anyone else who wishes to speak in support to this case? Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this case? Okay, seeing none, we will close the hearing.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Michael, thank you for all your work on this for everybody. Okay, next we have Z1117 Capitol Boulevard.
This is a request to rezone just over 2 acres from R6 to industrial mixed use with a 7-story height limit. Your North CAC voted in favor earlier this year, and your Planning Commission also recommends approval. So this is, we'll see in some of the other images later on, Capitol Boulevard runs out here roughly. So these 2 parcels have R6 zoning and are surrounded on all sides by other parcels with IX industrial mixed use zoning. with the exception of the one parcel to the south, due south, which is a commercial mixed-use, 3-story height limit. So here's Capitol Boulevard. We're up pretty close to Triangle Town Center here, just south of 540. And you can see that the commercial frontage along Capitol Boulevard here is largely, at least on this side of the right-of-way, is largely dominated by auto dealerships. There is some retail to the north of the site. And then across the street, you have retail associated with the Triangle Town Center and also some hotel use there and office to the south. So a view of the frontage along Capitol Boulevard. So now while this parcel doesn't have frontage on Capitol Boulevard, the stuff that touches it does. So it's back behind this field of cars in the image. Similarly, in this one from the Johnson Lexus parking lot. So what's here now, pretty limited entitlement, 6 units per acre, maximum of 12 units. And the request would allow a lot more residential entitlement, a lot more, would add office and retail entitlement and also industrial space here. And I just, in talking with the staff about this case, I wanted to just call out the industrial intensity that's permitted here seems much larger than the retail or office, and that's tied to the parking requirements. So the industrial parking requirements are much lower, and so you could have a much bigger space simply because you don't have to provide parking at as high a rate. Your future land use map here is for community mixed use, and this is located on the urban form map in a growth center. You can see Capitol just off the map here is partially designated as a transit emphasis corridor, partially as a parkway on the urban form map, and then you're also close to this transit stop buffer area. So this is overall consistent with the plan, although it is inconsistent with the future land use map. So the future land use map here, commercial mixed use, the industrial mixed use district allows uses that are not necessarily indicated by the commercial mixed use designation on the future land use map. And then the inconsistency with the urban form map here is really about your whether or not they had offered a frontage, which they did not. Given the disposition of the lot, you might want to consider whether or not you think a frontage would make a meaningful difference here. But overall consistent with the plan. Again, your Planning Commission and your North CAC both recommend approval. What questions could I answer for you?
Any questions for open hearing?
Just curious about the new legislation about comp plan consistency. I noticed this one has some inconsistent elements. Are we treading out into deep water here?
No, sir, we are not. This is a somewhat old case that was filed good time ago in 2017, and so it's not subject to the new requirements. But a very logical question on your part.
Okay.
I guess I'll ask my question now. I mean, I could ask it later, but I'm looking at the future land use map, and there's nothing in here that says industrial in the future development of this area. So we have regional mixed use, which is right adjacent to one of these properties, I guess. And then there's community mixed use, and then there's also high density residential. So it seems like the future land use map, there's also business and commercial services on the other side of Capitol Boulevard. So it seems like this entire area is envisioned for something different than industrial. And I mean, we'll certainly allow the both sides to talk, but I spoke with the applicant's attorney earlier, and who asked that this be sent to committee, and I would be agreeable to that because I'd like to have a larger discussion about you know, the intent of the future development of this area and whether or not this, even though it's a small piece of land, you know, is this setting a precedent for the future development of this area?
Right, so it is inconsistent with the future land use map. As I noted before, the community mixed use designation the uses envisioned in that and the uses allowed by industrial mixed use are not a perfect match. There's a lot of overlap, but not a perfect match. I would say the existing zoning in this area is,
It is industrial, yeah.
it is industrial,
Yeah.
and that's largely, if you think back to the remapping process that we went through to apply the new districts of the code, probably, I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that what was here was probably thoroughfare district. And so what has been mapped as a result of the conversion process, that translation to create similar entitlement between the old districts and the new districts while not creating nonconformity, I think the IX is really tied to all those dealership parking lots and then the uses associated with the dealerships.
Right, and,
Yeah.
and as we go forward, we're going to be doing a Capitol Boulevard corridor study for this
Yes, sir.
area. And so I want to be conservative. I want to be conservative in how we're rezoning these things, so that we're not making commitments to this area becoming industrial if really our intent as a city and as a community is to see this area develop differently.
Sure.
I understand that. I think for this parcel, since it is surrounded by industrial, is currently being used that way, and is it correct? Does one person own, is it one owner for most of this property, which is obviously the car dealership? It would be awful difficult to pull out a small parcel in the middle of all that property they own and tell them they can't use it for the purpose that they're using all the surrounding property for. That's just, I mean, I get the
Yeah, I know, but
the
I would
long-range
like an
plan, but
opportunity
I
to-
also think that, you know, they already have a well-established business there, and they own this property, and my feeling was when we remapped it R6 because there was probably still a house on it.
Well, the R6 would not have been touched by the remapping. Remember, we
Okay.
did not change residential districts.
Okay.
Well, you know, you can let the applicant speak to this, but I would like an opportunity to take this into committee and at least have one opportunity to discuss this in a little bit more detail.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Isabel Maddox here tonight on behalf of Lumley LLC, the owners of the subject property. I'm here tonight with Travis Flewitt, our traffic engineer of Kimley Horn. As by item stated, we're requesting these two small R6 lots be rezoned to IX to create compatible zoning with the adjacent properties. And if you look at this map that's up here, you'll see that, and you probably can't do the math in your head, but approximately 78% of the subject property abuts other Johnson Lexus owned properties. There's a couple of different partnerships, but they're all owned beneficially by the same person. So that 78% of the boundary abuts other Johnson properties, and 98% of the boundary is surrounded by IX. Now keep in mind, this is not heavy industrial, this is industrial mixed use, so the uses aren't smelting plants and that kind of thing. When we were adopting the UDO, staff said they wanted to see more general use cases. We felt like this was kind of the poster child for a general use case, surrounded by IX, all commercial uses, no residential neighbors anywhere near. And in fact, no neighbors came to our neighbors meeting, 0. Staff did require a TIA to be done on this, in connection with this case, which Kimley Horn performed, found minimal impacts caused by this rezoning. And they stated, which I think is correct, that any redevelopment of this property is probably going to be in tandem with the adjacent properties. It probably will be an expansion of the current Johnson Lexus, which will bring a significant development to the city of Raleigh. And it will also facilitate the extension of Sumner Boulevard, which will go across Capitol and connect ultimately with Wake Forest Road. And the extension of, do you have a map up here, Bynum, that shows the Sumner extension? I just wanted to kind of touch on that if you have it.
I don't think I have.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that might show it. Yeah, so the extension is kind of like, comes through here like this, sort of. And so one of these lots will most likely be decimated, at least one, by this property. And so what that's going to leave is some remnants. And if they're zoned something different than IX, then it's going to be kind of awkward to be developing that property altogether. So that's why we felt it made sense for a general use case and for IX. Staff did determine this case was consistent with the comp plan and compatible with the neighborhood, not consistent with the future land use map, as we've heard. Still, North CAC voted 22-7 in favor of this case. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval. Mr. Cox expressed some concerns at the North CAC about the future land use map issue, and in subsequent conversations, he's expressed those concerns, and we feel there's good justification for that here, one of which being that staff found it overall to be consistent with the comp plan. But we are certainly willing to go to committee, and I've talked to some of you today about that, and so we are agreeable to go into committee next week, I hope. But I also would like to note that in a general use case, council has the ability to make certain adjustments to the case on its own motion, which include things like height, area, and zoning district. So there is some flexibility even for a general use case. That's section 10.2.4.F.5.G, which I'm glad I have it written in front of me. So I do want you to be aware of that provision, that because I know you don't get a lot of general use cases, but I think this one does make sense as a general use case, and it does make sense to zone IX. And so we're agreeable to committee, and thank you for your time. Certainly available to answer any questions that you have, and Mr. Fluid is available as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask if there's anyone else here that wishes to speak. We'll ask first in support of this case. No, you've already talked.
No, I'm not talking.
Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in opposition to this case? Okay, we will refer the matter to committee.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Okay.
Even though you offered to do that, in my opinion, I agree with the mayor's comments earlier. There, to me, with the caseload of the committee that we already have, and the compelling evidence here that is completely surrounded, almost like 78%, I think you said, and 98%. I cannot foresee anything in the committee that would come up that changed my mind that would not go along with this zoning case.
I think there are, I mean, it's a general zoning case too, and I think that needs to be discussed. And
well, it is, and most of the time I would never vote for a general zoning case, but this is so unusual that it's completely surrounded. I'm going to make a motion for approval.
I will second that because I don't want to set a bad precedent. This is such a de minimis little parcel that it'll never drive any future land use for, towards or against. Now, I do want the city attorney to tell me that we are not going to run afoul of, I mean, I've already heard that this case came forward before the comp plan consistency law came into place, but just tell me one more time, this inconsistency will not blow up our ability to treat other parcels that are less de minimis than this one differently.
No, sir. And since this was filed before the trigger date for comp plan consistency statements, it won't have an impact to automatically change any of our plans.
Right. Well, again, I think we are going to, the date is coming, we're going to have that big conversation. Maybe staff is prepping us for that, but I second the motion.
I mean, this is my district. I would have liked to have had this conversation. Since we can't have that conversation, I will have to vote no against this rezoning.
Okay, and I understand. I would assume that that conversation, as you pointed out, is what's going to be part of the small area plan discussion, setting that longer range vision and working toward it as opposed to a piece by piece.
Well, there are issues like general use, like putting up cell towers and so forth on the property that I mean, there is residential nearby. I mean, I think that those are concerns as well. So I will vote against this.
I have a motion and a second to approve the case. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, 6-2. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to Z 2117 Lewisburg Road, southeast corner of the intersection with James Road.
So this is a request to rezone just under an acre from R6 to neighborhood mixed-use 3-story height limit with conditions. Your CAC voted in favor back in October. Your Planning Commission also recommends an approval. Your Growth and Natural Resources Committee discussed this item, and their discussion focused on limiting uses, limiting building height, and limiting residential density. The public hearing was continued to today, to this date certain, and for the applicant to submit conditions at this point, you would need to close the hearing.
Okay. Is there anybody else? The hearing's still open.
Correct.
Okay, so is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this item before we close the hearing?
May I?
Yes.
Thank you, but I'm good here. Doctor tells me I need to stand anyway. I must stand by the case. Thank you. It's not as bad as it looks. Actually, it's worse.
So you haven't had that surgery yet, I assume?
Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to speak to you folks tonight. I came before you when we started this thing, and I don't think my physical problems had surfaced at the time, but I made you aware of problems that came about. You've been very gracious about accommodating what is a disability, and I thank you very much for that. Between November the 4th and January 26th, I've had 2 major back surgeries. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy I can still walk. And thank you for accommodating me so very much. When we last met, and I stood before you, I was under the impression, or forgive me, my name's Danny Eason. I reside at 7024 Christie Drive, Garner, North Carolina. Last time I stood before you, I was hoping and thinking that you might go ahead and take a vote and get this thing approved, and you referred it to committee, and I wasn't happy about that, but we went to committee, and I've told you consistently that I care that this place not become some rundown hodgepodge piece of crap. The committee helped me to see and understand conditions I could attach that would improve the possibilities of it looking better. I think across 5 categories. They identified 13 items that I'm willing to restrict, in addition to the 2-story height and the 10-unit residential that you talked about. So I'm ready to turn those in, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and hope you're feeling better. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this item? Okay, then we will close the hearing and allow the applicant the time to submit those conditions. Thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you, guys.
Next, we have Z 2317 Litchford Road.
This is a new hearing. This is a request to rezone 8.5 acres of a 12-acre property. So the full property you can see here. And it's just this portion on the more northern portion. So we're rezoning here. The request is to rezone from R1 to R10 with conditions. The CAC voted in favor back in December, and that vote was based on the most recent conditions, and the Planning Commission also unanimously recommends approval. So we're just inside 540 here, just south of Harps Mill, largely surrounded by single family. On the east and south side, there is a little bit of commercial use to the north of this site. There's a nursing home and a daycare and a gas station there with frontage along Litchford and at the intersection with Harps Mill. This is a view of the site north on Litchford Road. So the site is back here. The property does include this area here. And then a view looking south along Litchford. The property is on your left. The rezoning site is on your left. And then looking south on Litchford. So and then a view from the street stub at Swarthmore Drive. So there are a number of conditions here. There are limits on uses, including telecommunications tower that Mr. Cox mentioned earlier this evening. The maximum density here, so it's R10 request, but the maximum density is 8 units per acre. Specification that all of the units would be either a detached house or townhouse. A height restriction of 39 feet. Principal building setback of 50 feet adjacent to the existing detached homes, and you can see that here. So remember, we looked at that view from Swarthmore down Dorrington Trail. So there's a 50-foot setback here shown in the purple color or the pink color along all those single-family lots there. And then specification about construction materials, a prohibition of vinyl siding, limit of, we've seen this condition before tonight, a limit of no more than 6 units in a single townhouse building, and then some specifications about building composition related to roof pitch, floor area, and garage. So again, there's that 50-foot.
So,
yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, back to the picture with the pink buffer.
Mm-hmm.
That 50-foot buffer, does that mean that Dorrington Trail would not be cut through, or that doesn't affect the road being cut through for access?
I don't believe it would prohibit the road being cut through. And I know Jason Myers is here and can speak more eloquently than I can about possible street connections here. So the change here is an increase in residential density, right? So from 1 unit an acre up to 8 as specified by conditions. And just note that the lot size here, there's no lot size specified in R1 for townhouse because it's not allowed, but the detached house lot size in your R10 district is 4,000 square feet compared to the 40,000 of your R1 district. On your urban form map, there is no designation present, and your future land use map calls this low density residential. So you're consistent overall with the comprehensive plan, but inconsistent with that future land use map. The low density residential designation recommends 6 units per acre or less, and this is at 8. So you do have a number of consistent policies, but you're inconsistent on your future land use. And because that conditional use, those conditions are saying 8 units and not 6, it's inconsistent with that conditional use district policy as well. Still, your Planning Commission and your CAC both recommend approval. Can I answer questions?
Any questions for staff before we open the hearing?
Still no comp planning consistency troubles?
Correct. It doesn't start until Z2817.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll open the hearing. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in support of this case?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Michael Birch with Morris Russell here on behalf of the applicant. Just to answer your question on the buffer. So our buffers are taken off of the properties themselves. It was not the intent at all to prohibit, the connection of Dorrington. We know from a block perimeter standpoint that would be required. What the condition is just a building setback. So it's not an impact on the ability to connect to that street. So what you see here is, again, a portion of property. The seller is retaining their property there, located along Litchford Road, just south of senior living facility, daycare, gas station, and then there's a Food Lion shopping center just north of that as well. That's within about, I believe, 0.2 miles if you walk this way, and if you were to use the sidewalks through the neighborhood, it'd be about 0.25 miles. There's no sidewalks located along the property today, but those would be installed, and that would connect to the other sidewalks on Litchford Road. Our request is for R10. We do have a condition that limits it to 8 units per acre, and it also limits the building type to single-family detached and townhouse, so no apartment building types that are otherwise allowed in the R10 district. We also worked with the CAC and through our neighborhood meetings. We had 2 neighborhood meetings. We were at the CAC 3 times, the last of which was a longer session focused on hammering out the conditions that you see before you. So those were focused on ensuring a compatible development. So we limited our building height to 39 feet, but we also require a roof, pitched roof, a sloped roof. We've limited the bulk of the townhouse buildings to no more than 6 units together. You can see the 50-foot buffer along those properties, but I think you can also see a stream that comes through here. And that is a buffered stream, so 50 feet on either side. So essentially, believe at its greatest point, probably right in here, when you come over the 50 feet on the center line, off the center line of the creek, that buffer area between the developable area and those lots gets to be, at its most 125 feet. Both sides of the stream are primary tree conservation areas, which have to be preserved and don't allow any tree disturbance in that area. And so, again, while we have a 50-foot building setback, the natural features really provide a much wider area and require the preservation of trees in that area. That results in about 18% of the site being in protected areas. And then when you add in the primary tree conservation area required along Litchford Road, that's another 8%, so a total of 26% of the site is kind of in protected, preserved areas. We also, in working with the CAC and neighbors, they were focused on quality as well, and so we've committed to quality, durable building materials. We've agreed to a minimum square footage of units. We've also required that each unit have at least a 1-car garage. So again, we acknowledge that we are inconsistent with the future land use map by those 2 dwelling units per acre. Given the 8.5 acres, it's about 17 additional units. But we think that that's reasonable in the public interest and appropriate here, given the amount of the site that will be protected, that those areas are between the area of development and the adjacent single-family neighbors. So we think this site can accommodate that additional density while preserving compatibility with the adjacent development. We think it provides a housing type, the townhouse housing type, which is kind of scarce in this area, but this is, I think, a good location for it given its proximity to goods and services within that 0.25 mile walking distance. So with that, we're also consistent with a number of comp plan policies, but here to answer any questions council may have.
I have a question.
Yes.
A question about the southern part of Dorrington. So that's going to remain a dead end since the owners is not going to give an easement across, and you're going to reroute Dorrington to the new street. Is it going to have a new name, or is it going to be Dorrington Trail as well?
We'll have to work with transportation staff. They may want us to set it up for ultimate connection, because when this property develops, again, they would be required to do that. So I would anticipate that. And then I would also anticipate, again, from block perimeter standpoint, we're going to have access onto Litchford Road as well. So, townhome developments now require public streets, so we'll have interconnected public streets.
Okay, any other questions for the open hearing?
So, did you say all townhouse?
the conditions limit it to single-family detached and townhomes. So those are the allowable building types.
What about maintaining the sort of parkway-like frontage that's there now?
Again, so Litchford Road is a thoroughfare. So again, that area along the thoroughfare is primary tree conservation area. Townhouses have to front on a public street, but they can't front on Litchford Road. They can't have driveways off Litchford Road. So they will be, there will be internal public streets that they front on.
Okay.
That's the only place where we have a build to. So the build to shouldn't affect Litchford Road.
Looks like the whole, you sort of indicated where there's a stream channel now. It looks like it's not a Neuse buffer stream, but it's more just a stormwater channel.
No, I believe we've had it surveyed and believe it's a buffered stream.
And I guess looks like the whole site pretty much is going to drain out of that channel back towards Dorrington Trail.
Yes, yep, it goes here, yep.
Okay. Thank you. We'll open the hearing. I guess I already opened it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak in support of this case?
See if I can hit the dot right. David Ulmer, 2105 Cedar Bluff Court, which is right about there. So yeah, this would be good for the area. They mentioned the Food Lion Plaza north of this property. There are several vacancies in that plaza. The Burger King on the corner has been empty for 6 months. I would be delighted to have some new neighbors with decent incomes in decent townhomes who could keep that plaza afloat. Nothing is bad for property values like a shopping plaza that goes under. I've talked to all my neighbors up on that side street there. Didn't get as many to the CAC as I wanted because that sounds fine. It's not really a motivator for a lot of people. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, everybody was very happy once they found that the price point of these homes was going to be in line, or actually, in our case, significantly higher than our homes. So they were excited. And we could use the business and the people. There's nothing special about the area. It's not an urban watershed. It's not historic. It's just an area in North Raleigh that could use a little bit more density that'll be walkable to a plaza near our homes. And so I don't know anybody in the area that's really had much resistance, other than the concern that generally traffic is always bad in Raleigh, which people equal traffic. So I would encourage you to please allow this to go through. As far as what the frontage looks like, I walk out my backyard, I see an older folks' home with all concrete and a gas station. So this will not look worse than the other two things I see out my backyard, I can promise you. So please take that under consideration. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak in support of this case? Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in opposition to this case? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the hearing, I guess, and bring it back to the table.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And then we have Z3117 Carp Road.
This is a request to rezone 1.29 acres from R4 to R6. Your Northeast CAC voted in opposition last month, but your Planning Commission recommends approval. So the property is largely surrounded by a PD, and you can see that on the zoning map here. And then you have some older, larger lot, R4 zoning with address on Carp Road that was not included in the PD. And this property is part of that older Carp Road neighborhood. So here's a look at that. So we're just west of the Neuse River, very close to kind of the back door of Milburnie Park. And we're New Bern Avenue is just down there. So just east and north of where Raleigh Beach Road and New Bern Avenue intersect, right? And just east of South Hall. So a couple of views of the site. This one at the top left is looking towards the site along Carp Road. another view south at Riverbed Drive, which is the street coming out of the PD, and then another view along Carp. So what's allowed here now is 4 units an acre with a maximum of probably about 5 units. And they're asking for 6 units an acre, which would allow them to build up to 7. Your setbacks change, they're smaller all around, and your lot size goes down considerably also. So your future land use map calls this low-density residential. You're consistent with that. The request is consistent with that because it's hitting that 6-unit mark. There's no urban form designation here. And this is overall consistent with the plan.
General use?
Yeah. I'm tired. Let me look at that. Yes, yes.
That's general.
No conditions.
Do we know, well, I guess we'll find out when we open the hearing. I'm good. Open the hearing?
Yeah, I was waiting for her to answer.
No, I think she did.
She did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
General use.
It is general use.
Yeah,
General use,
I
okay.
just want to add, so the PD that surrounds this is the Rogers Farm PD, and the areas of the PD that surround this, some vary between kind of 6.5, 8, and 20 units an acre. So a portion of the PD is a good bit denser to the south of this area, but the single-family part is between 6.5 and 8 in different areas.
Okay. All right, we'll open the hearing. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in support of this case?
Good evening. Chase Massey from FLM Engineering here on behalf of the applicant. Staff did a good job summarizing our rezoning request. I did just want to note that throughout the process, we have had 2 neighborhood meetings. At our first neighborhood meeting, our initial rezoning request was for R10 and potential townhome units, which was not well received at all. And at the second neighborhood meeting, we came back with the current request you have before you with the R6 rezoning. At both CAC meetings, we opened up the floor and asked if there were any conditions we could place on our request to generate some support. The feedback we received was that the neighbors would not support any type of rezoning or anything that changed it from R4. That's why we left the request as is.
Okay.
So I'm here to answer any questions or anything you need from me.
Do you know why the opposition to the change?
I'll let them.
Okay.
I know a lot of them are here and they want to speak, but the feedback we received was they were concerned about the density and the traffic was the 2 main items.
In the neighborhood meeting, there was 3 items. They asked if they would be annexed, would they be required to connect to Raleigh utilities, and would their property taxes increase if new homes were built?
Right, and the first 2 items, I believe staff has confirmed, they will not be annexed, and they will not be required to connect to utilities. As far as the property tax increasing, I'm not sure if that will.
So do you you're going to ask to be annexed, though? No? Are you do you plan to be annexed?
Our parcels do. I think their
part.
concern was
That's their property.
would surrounding neighbors be annexed?
No. Looks to me like you're not in the city limits now.
No, we will be annexed as part of our.
Okay, so now the question is, you'll be building your infrastructure, streets, curb, gutter, storm, or you'll just be doing a fee in lieu, waiting for other things? Or what will you be doing?
We haven't progressed to that part as far as the design plans, and I do know that the feedback we received from staff was we would have to extend utilities across our property frontage.
Okay. Thanks. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak in support of this case? Is there anyone that wishes to speak in opposition to this case? And And anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition to this case, you can come on down and sit in the front row so you're ready. Or maybe you're speaking for the group.
I'm Teresa Slaughter, 1321 Carp Road. I'm kind of speaking for
Okay.
most of us.
And can you pull the
letting
mic
them
down so we
speak
can hear
too.
you?
I hope you guys got my map. I sent it, tried to get it to show you what Carp Street actually looks like. It's two dead ends. One's a cul-de-sac, no exit out. We have to go through Edgewater subdivision to get in and out of our street. We are county. We don't want to become city, have no problem with it. But as it is now, the road is too narrow for the amount of homes they want to build. It's only 46 feet wide. As it is now, when fire trucks or emergency vehicles come down the road, they have to drive in and back all the way out. There are only 2 fire hydrants. They're trying to fit, from what we've been told, every time we've been told, they've added a house. So that's kind of why we've stuck with the R4. We would agree to 4 single-family homes. They have to have driveways because they really can't park on the street, or else no emergency vehicles can get through. We have a lot of elderly on our street. We need ambulances, fire trucks. Anytime we have to call for help, we have to wait for a county sheriff, even though Raleigh City police officer lives in Edgewater subdivision. I think the person who bought the first 2 lots, 1308 and 1312, were misinformed. He was told he was purchasing 3 lots, and in fact, there are only 2. This is already a subdivision. If you look at the records, it's called the Seawell subdivision. And it's been that way, and family members still live there. The only reason the house on the end was annexed by the city is she was elderly, she was sickly, she needed help with her septic, so she requested to be annexed. The rest of us do not want to be annexed, and we understand, yes, it is voluntary, but it will just make it harder. We would like to be protected from any of the city stuff that they do, because we basically moved out of the city to avoid city water, city taxes, all that other kind of stuff. We enjoy our quiet neighborhood. There's little to no crime, wonderful wildlife. We have coyotes, foxes, 13 deer. You look out your window, it's a nice, peaceful neighborhood. Even though we back up to Edgewater, we don't have a lot of noise and traffic and all. But like I said, when this first started, they told us they wanted to build 6 houses. There's no way 6 houses are gonna fit on 1.29 acres. I'm sorry, it's just not gonna fit. Not considering I was told they wanted to build homes the size of Edgewater, which are all 2-story, 2,000 plus square feet. We're all 1-story homes. The largest is maybe 1,800 square feet. So we would look out our doors and see these monstrous homes. So that's pretty much, I hope I covered everything. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition? Yes, please come up and give your name and address.
Okay. My name is Laney Sewell. I live 1325 Carp Road. I've been there 43 years. This is a historic area, a Lynn Sewell subdivision. He owned this, Sewell's, everybody probably remembers Sewell's Lake. This is part of this area. My concern is we are boxed in. We got a dead end here, and then when Edgewater came, they closed us off into a circle, and we cannot get out unless we go the riverbed, which is Edgewater. So we have no way to get out. And then they have a sign out on Raleigh Beach Road saying Carp Road. And people cannot find us. They come to the end where that sign is, but they can't find us. So they have to call us to ask how to get in. And how to get in, they have to go up into Edgewater, Stony Bottom, make a right, then go down 2 houses and make another right on Riverbed, then come down, then turn and go back up the Cobb Road. And that's not respecting us at all. We don't have any way of getting in or out. And another thing, since they closed us in down there, it has developed where people go down there and have parking, and they do their affair. They have drugs, go down there and smoke drugs. We even had a person to come down and live in a car, and we had to call the police to get him out from in there. And 2 months ago, my phone rang, and it was my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law house on the end. The alarm went off, and they called me and said, "Are you in the house?" And I said, "No." I went down. There was 2 boys breaking into the house, one standing in the yard and one working at the door. And I went there, turned around, and just sat there. And finally, they found out that this wasn't a car that was going to move. So then I think the guy said, "You better come on." And they came down the path, and I sat there long enough so I could identify them. And when they got close enough so I could identify them, then I took off and started blowing the horn and went to my house. So this is what Edgewater has developed for our community. And I wish you all would consider for us to get in and out. And this road is not even a 1/10 of a mile. It's a very short road that we are living on. And they're talking about putting on 7 more houses. And we could hardly get in and out now. And we don't have no way to get out. For them to even build a house, they wouldn't have no way to get out unless they go to Edgewater. So we need some consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Alan Terrell. I live at 1317 Cobb Road. Like my neighbors said, we're closed in. We have no utilities. We have no water. All of us have private wells. We have our own septic tanks. And they say, "Oh, we're in the city limits." We're not. And so for them to come and ask us to give South a home, we're willing to let them come in and give 3 or 4 homes. But that area is so small. I'm right in front of all the area, both right there. And it's no good trying to put a little rat in a molehill. You can't do it. It's too small. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm trying to figure out.
Anyone else?
Sorry, we're looking at the annexation lines. Was there anyone else that wishes to speak in opposition to this case?
I have a question for the applicant. Do you plan on annexing into your property into the city?
Yes.
When do you plan on filing that application?
Pretty soon.
The reason I say that because once you do that, you're gonna have to do road improvements.
Right.
And those road improvements will actually assist you all in widening and getting in and out. But it will have to be part of the city limits. I don't know how far soon is, so I'm not comfortable on approving this until we have some more definite answers.
And we just haven't, we just haven't advanced to that stage yet as far as whatever improvements are required by the city during the subdivision site plan approval process. We're willing to meet those. I do just want to know, we're not affiliated with Edgewater or have anything to do with Edgewater whatsoever. And we would certainly make any of the city's required improvements along our frontage there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not.
And I will say, we're glad to start the annexation process. That's the first I've heard of it tonight. We haven't gotten that feedback from staff that we need to be annexed there. But if that's what we need to do, we're glad to do that.
I think we're having okay, is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this? Okay. Oh, you
Well,
go.
this is actually in support.
Okay.
I'm represent the builder and the owner of the property. wanted to make an announcement tonight and
Yeah,
just
and
let
can you give us your name and address?
David Golston, 1308 Carp Road. Wanted to say to the, first of all, thank you guys for your time. Wanted to say on behalf of the owner is that, you know, this project is relatively simple. What he's looking to do is to help beautify the city. You know, Raleigh is in, you know, contenders with getting Amazon second headquarters, and we're growing capital. We have to accommodate the growth, and we have to accommodate what the future plan has in store for Raleigh. And having the community that's going to be new, having it that where it's going to be modern, is also something that we have to take in consideration. This is an opportunity for the builder to, the owner to annex into the city, to pay city taxes that's going to last for a lifetime, and also to tap into a sewer that's involved in the city, which is all, you know, goes into enhancing the city. And so I wanted to make sure that we did say that on behalf of the owners.
Okay, thank you. I
Thank
think there was one more person that wanted to speak. You've already spoken. There was someone else. Sure.
I think you didn't say Carp Road, did you?
On behalf of the owners.
On
But he
behalf.
On
was
behalf.
Speaking on behalf of the
He'll speak on behalf of the owners.
owner, but he did not give his own address. Yes, sir.
I'm Bruce Schluchter. I live at 1321 Carp Road, and I'm in opposition to this. Both parties knew what the zoning was prior to purchasing this property. They're trying to do an infill development within our existing subdivision by combining not one lot, but 3 lots. It does not follow any of your rules. I mean, we are county. We have to follow your ETJ. But we've already had 6 meetings, all of us are in agreement. 4 houses, they can do it, but on the bottom of the one lot, there is stormwater, drainage creek that is unbuildable, and there's also a utility easement across the back of the property. They don't need to go any further. They're wasting their time.
Okay.
For your
Thank you, sir.
consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? If not, we will close the hearing and bring it back. Is this
Ashley-
conditional use or is this general?
General.
The general use.
Actually, Madam Mayor, can we actually keep the hearing open and send this to committee, date certain, first meeting in May? To give the committee time to move this and also give the applicant time to do whatever paperwork they feel they need appropriate that may help their case.
Well,
I would like to say that I've been to the CAC meetings where this was discussed. The parties are very far apart. The residents on Carp Road, it's obvious, I mean, they're not in the city, they live effectively in the county. The only thing that's really adjacent to this area is the Neuse River Greenway, effectively, and the Neuse River. I guess I'm having a hard time being convinced it's really necessary or even in the city's interest to continue expanding the city's boundaries by annexing this property. And so I think that's one point of discussion. It's not just a question of, you know, obviously, yeah, yes, we can improve this property. The question is, should we improve this property, in my view? Because at some point, I mean, is our intent to annex land all the way up to the river, or should we actually, is it in better interest of the area to keep this outside the city?
Mayor?
So
Yes.
I look at the fact that these two groups seem very far apart. There does appear to be all kinds of problems with accessing Carp Road. So I'm going to make a motion to deny.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion among the council? All in favor?
of the
Aye.
Oh, the motion is to deny. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
I think we're done.
there's nothing else to come before us. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.